Damoritosh, the god of war, destruction, and subjugation. His followers and his congregations all believe that conquest is an ever-moving wave. But just because you were weak, you were bested in combat, does not mean that you are not deserving or not worthy of respect. Damoritosh does not believe in mistreating those that you have bested in combat. You've already proven you are better and far superior to those, so there is no point in shaming them any further. That is provided, of course, that they do keep the peace, lest another conquest, show of strength be needed. We're gonna take a look at Damoritosh, what they're like, what their followers are like, and the blessings or curses one can receive for gaining the attention of a god of war. Damoritosh is the primary patron for the entirety of the Veskarium. The Vesk have always been a warlike and conquering species. And even though there is a temporary peace with the Pact Worlds right now, however tenuous that is, Damoritosh still remains the pillar of Vesk society. To the Vesk, war and conquest are woven throughout the entirety of the universe. They see it in the interactions between plants, they see it in the interactions between animals, and of course, different species throughout the universe. War is everywhere. Those who are able to accept this reality are actually able to move forward, and they can find their place in the history books. But those who can't can and should die a coward's death, scorned and forgotten. War requires sacrifice, and it is everyone's societal duty to sacrifice whatever need be to provide victory. If this means abandoning a tradition that is no longer working, so be it. If this means abandoning an outpost on a planet which can no longer be held, so be it. If this means taking over an entire planet for strategic resources, so be it. Just ask the Skittermander how well that went for them. Actually, went pretty well for them. Damoritosh is a harsh deity. They are someone very difficult to serve. He has no concern for freedom, for luxury, or comfort. He is also sometimes referred to as the Grim Commander by those who would serve him. Obedience to Damoritosh is tantamount to the tenets of the religion. Everyone must serve with soldier-like obedience, unquestioning of the authority. And all who would seek blessings from Damoritosh are pushed to seek conquest, to seek victory in all of its forms, whatever it takes, whatever the cost, they must win. Does this mean that all who serve Damoritosh are dishonorable? No. He does prefer that if you make an oath, you keep it. However, if making this oath starts to get in the way of your conquest, starts to get in the way of your victory, then achieving victory is more important than keeping your promise. In the mind of Damoritosh and all of his followers, the strong will rule the weak. It's not simply about crushing and defeating your enemies, though that does happen. The primary reason for this is to advance the ideals, to advance the betterment. If you have conquested someone, your way of life is better. So, the weak must now adhere to your new rules. A hard-fought loss is still a win. A honorable surrender is still a win. Now, while Damoritosh is the primary god within the Veskarium, that does not mean that the influence of the great conqueror has not spread to other parts of the universe. Even mercenaries, warriors, and soldiers, they might still serve Damoritosh even though they are in the Pact Worlds. In fact, many of the Kasathans and the Lashuntas will worship Damoritosh. Many of the churches or the temples devoted to Damoritosh are actually bunkers, something that is heavily fortified, easily defendable, stockpiled with weapons, and always manned by at least a few soldiers. Vast majority of the Damoritosh temples could withstand a long, protracted siege, should someone decide to go to war with the god of war. But before we move on to the temples of Damoritosh, if you're new here, my name's Nathaniel. I talk about world lore around role-playing games so that you can have a better and more in-depth experience with your players. If that's something you're interested in, I would love to have you join me at the table. And if you're finding some value out of the video today, please let me know by hitting the thumbs up button, as that really helps me out with the algorithm. Now, the temples of Damoritosh we've already discussed are basically forts. They are heavily fortified and easily defendable bunkers. But where do they decide where to put them or where to build them? Most of the time, temples are built at past historical battles. Wars or places of battle that were significant to the past will likely have a bunker or a Church of Damoritosh built there. Oftentimes in current wars, you will find a Temple of Damoritosh being used as a bunker or a strategic stronghold. And if there's any planned or future conquests, you may find a Temple of Damoritosh being built in places where the Vesk might want to go in the future. Most of these temples are highly sophisticated. Advanced weapons research is being done in these locations. Research and development of all kinds of military ordnance, training for soldiers, new recruits, advanced veterans, it all happens here. One of the more important locations to the Vesk is actually on the fringes of the Veskarium, a shrine known as Tomb of the War Heroes. This place was built inside of a swarm spaceship, a massive ship. This temple, this shrine, was dedicated to the first Vesk victory against the swarm. Now, there are several locations considered to be the primary places of worship for Damoritosh, the Veskarium being obviously choice number one. The Veskarium is an entire empire. The Vesk, who are these space lizards, have a solar system of 8 planets, which they have all conquered. It started on Vesk Prime, the first planet closest to the sun, and as space travel became a thing, they went out among the different planets and slowly but surely conquered all of them. But even within the Pact Worlds itself, Akaton, Castrovel, and the Adari are all places you can find large amounts of worshippers for Damoritosh. One thing that's difficult to overemphasize is the sheer amount of resources that a god of war and the faith of war possesses. Other planets, other systems, other civilizations make deals with the religion of Damoritosh, and they exchange weapons for strategic military favors which they may call in at a later date. The libraries of Damoritosh, the sheer amount of strategic information that they possess is staggering. Vast swaths of strategic intelligence against would-be enemies or even existing allies. But be careful about asking for military assistance, because if you ask for too much, that could be a sign of how weak you are and potentially draw the ire or the attention of Damoritosh, which might single you out as being the next target. Now, should Damoritosh align with your ideals or maybe the ideals of your character, what benefits do you gain from following such a deity? For one thing, you are very knowledgeable about the area of war and the history of the Veskarium. So, when it comes to culture checks to recall knowledge about war, history, or specifically history of the Veskarium, you can reduce all of these DC checks by 5. You will also gain the favored weapon of Doshko. And as a follower of Damoritosh, you are called to seek victory, to subjugate your enemies, and to obey all lawful orders given by your superiors. Things that you should definitely try to avoid are choosing diplomacy over war, abandoning your duty, and rejecting an honorable surrender. Should you follow and abide by all of these tenets, and you receive the blessings of Damoritosh, they can appear like this. Should you need a weapon and be without one, one may suddenly appear in your hand. Your enemies may suddenly and unexpectedly flee from your presence or cower before you. And in some cases, death won't even stop you from continuing the good fight. Now, if you disobey the tenets from Damoritosh, some terrible things can befall upon you. Curses, the likes of which may cause your weapons to suddenly and unexpectedly break. You may find your strength failing you when you most need it in a time of combat. And the strength of your resolve may not always be there, especially if you encounter a new foe or an unexpected enemy which you know nothing about. Damoritosh is very structured, very rigid, with a military hierarchy that is easy to follow. However, if you're looking for a god that does not follow this structure and is more a way of life and a way of being, you want to click here and discover them. Thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me and the channel and for voting on this video topic today. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.